Hey guys, what's up? It's Scott Clark with Scooter Media, and in today's video, I am putting the Canon R7 through some overheating tests to see if it will overheat. Let's get into it. The Canon R7 was released a few months ago and sits in the middle of the Canon mirrorless camera lineup. Some of its predecessors suffer from some overheating issues, so I thought I would test it out to see if it will overheat as well. For all of the tests, I kept the LCD screen open and away from the camera body to allow for the most airflow, and that's usually how I use the camera as well. I also let the camera cool down inside for about an hour in between tests with no cards or battery in it and the screen left open. The first few tests I did were inside my studio with the air conditioning on, and the temperature was set to around 23 degrees Celsius, which is around 73 degrees Fahrenheit. I set up a timer and filmed the timer with the R7, which is the full screen, and then filmed the R7's LCD screen to see if and when it would overheat, which you can see in the bottom right hand corner. The first test was testing out the 4K fine at 24 frames per second, which is downsampled from 7K. The overheating warning light came on around the 55-minute mark, but the 4K fine did not overheat and ran for almost 2.5 hours and stopped once the battery died. The second test that I did was testing out the 4K 60 frames per second, and the overheating warning light came on at around the 31-minute mark, but the 4K 60 did not overheat as well and ran for about 1 hour and 38 minutes and then stopped once the 256 gig card was full. The third test that I did inside was testing out the 120 frames per second in HD. The overheating warning light never came on and the 120 frames per second did not overheat, but it did stop at 1 hour and 30 minutes due to an internal timer. So the camera will automatically shut off after an hour and a half in this mode, which is totally fine as I have no idea why anyone would need to run it longer than that in 120 frames per second. And since none of these modes overheated, I decided not to test the regular 4K 24 FPS, as that mode isn't supposed to overheat and there was no chance of that overheating if these modes didn't. I then took everything outside and used the exact same setup in the sun to see if the results would be any different in the heat outside. The temperature ranged from about 27 degrees Celsius to 30 degrees Celsius, which is about 80 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was mostly sunny with a few clouds now and again. Again, the first test was testing out the 4K fine at 24 frames per second, and the overheating warning light came on around the 19-minute mark, and the 4K fine did overheat at around 45 minutes, so this was the first situation where the camera actually overheated. I then tested the 4K 60 frames per second outside, and the overheating warning light came on at around 21 minutes, and the 4K 60 did overheat as well after about 40 minutes. So be aware that in the 4K fine and the 4K 60 frames per second that the camera did in fact overheat. The third test that I did outside was testing out the 120 frames per second in HD. The overheating warning light came on at around 34.5 minutes, but the 120 FPS did not overheat but did stop at 1 hour and 30 minutes due to the internal timer again. Since I did see some overheating in a couple of the modes, I decided to test the regular 4K at 24 frames per second outside, which Canon claims will not overheat. I can say that after my test, it seems they are correct, as the overheating light never came on once and the camera ran for about 3 hours and 60 minutes before the 256 gig card was full. In conclusion, it seems like the Canon R7 won't overheat in an inside studio situation in any of the modes, but that it will outside in direct sunlight in the 4K fine and the 4K 60 frames per second, depending on the temperature and after a while. The fact that it won't overheat in the regular 4K is awesome, as you're guaranteed to be able to shoot in 4K without any worries. For me personally, I don't really have a problem with these findings, as I don't think that I'll be running the camera for extended periods of time outside in 4K fine or 4K 60. For anyone that thinks they might though, be aware of this and know that these tests were done here in Canada, and while the temps were warm outside, it's nothing compared to warmer areas around the world. If you have made it this far and found value in today's video, please give it a thumbs up, and I'd really appreciate it if you would consider subscribing, as it really does make a difference, and I'd love to have you join me on this YouTube journey. And also remember to hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the things on this channel. I recently did a video reviewing the video specs of the Canon R7. If you're interested in checking that out, please click on the link right here. Thanks for watching today's video. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.